A lot of people in Edmond are familiar with places like the Wheeler District in Oklahoma City or Carlton Landing in eastern Oklahoma, which are new urbanism style developments. And they've been built out over a decade or more. And so now they've transitioned into being more than single family homes. Now they've got shops and restaurants and small private schools and churches and, are bringing multifamily opportunities, and folks are seeing that these are high quality homes that give you an opportunity to really live in community and have, a walkable space and to live a healthier lifestyle, and to be connected with your neighbors, to be connected with the business owners around. And the fact that Liberty Park and some of these other new urbanism developments that are in the works in Edmond are going to bring new business opportunities that are going to bring sales tax, and that's very attractive to the city.
Welcome back to Cities in Motion. I'm Jacob, the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Each week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable. Today, we're heading to central Oklahoma, focusing on Edmond and the greater Oklahoma City region, an area growing fast and facing big questions about zoning, housing, and how growth should actually feel on the ground. With Oklahoma City rewriting its development code for the first time in decades, new mixed-use projects emerging, and renewed conversations about transit and walkability, the region is at a real crossroads. To help break it all down, I'm joined by Cody Boyd, founder of Edmond Urbanist, a local advocacy group pushing for walkable neighborhoods, people-centered development, and a more connected future for Edmond and beyond. Before we jump in, next week's episode will be the final episode of Season 1, and after that, I'll be taking a short break before coming back with more conversations like this. If you're enjoying the show, please follow and subscribe wherever you're listening. It's the best way to support the podcast and make sure you don't miss what's next. Alright, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Cody Boyd of Edmond Urbanist. Welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, tell us who you are, tell us about your organization.
Yeah, my name's Cody Boyd. I am the founder of the Edmond Urbanist Association and started Edmond Urbanist in early 2024 after making some career changes. Most of my career has been spent in state and local government. I worked at the Oklahoma Department of Transportation for a decade, and then a couple of years at Embark, which is Oklahoma City's public transit provider. And so a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge working with cities and working with infrastructure and learning how it all gets funded, and of course how land use and development affects everything about infrastructure and transportation. So we started this project, to highlight what's going great in Edmond and advocate for and inspire the next generation of development in Edmond.
Your mission emphasizes walkable, people-centered neighborhoods in vibrant business districts. How do you define that mission for Edmond's future, and what's already moving the needle there?
Yeah, so when it comes to development in the built environment, we're our vision is going to be realized by better city codes and processes, really to facilitate what developers want to build right now in many cases. From there, we want to be able to show good products and examples from other similar cities to help inspire developers, landowners, investors, businesses, and builders, about what is possible in the future. And then, of course, to advocate for city leaders to help facilitate and make that possible. From the city government side, a walkable downtown and neighborhoods and business districts that put people and our local businesses first over moving cars at high speeds, which is not unique to Edmond, but like a lot of similar cities that have sprawled and have a large suburban sprawl population, that's what city leaders grapple with the most is, well, how do we manage all of these cars, and trying to help, show a different vision that says, hey, the solution to sprawl and to traffic is to build density, and the solution to local businesses and sales tax revenue is to build these type of neighborhoods and facilitate the types of development that's going to pour back into the city rather than being a cost for infrastructure.
What has been the response from the community and the city council to these propositions?
Well, the city council, I'm actually really happy with the relationships I have with individual city council members and the mayor, and with city staff. Largely, they're on board not solely because, but they definitely recognize the value especially when it comes to sales tax and local business success. In Oklahoma, we have some of the most restrictive state laws about how property tax can be used by municipalities. For cities, it's really all about sales tax. That's the lifeblood. And when folks realize that with density, with mixed use type development, we can bring more opportunities for sales tax revenue. And that definitely has the city council's attention because they're looking at how can we grow sales tax and how can we can recruit new businesses here, whether it be corporate offices or some of the big brands that folks want to see, realizing that it's going to take density and it's going to take affordable housing or at least attainable housing for the workforce to be able to go out and recruit. And we actually have a new economic development director in the city of Edmond, and she shares a lot of those same goals of realizing that for us to recruit and move beyond fast food and car washes and strip shops that we've had, that's been kind of the style of development we've had for the last few decades, that we're going to have to look at the built environment differently and respond to what the market wants, and that's going to mean some changes in our city policies, and it's going to mean some changes in how the community and public opinion on some of these things happen. But largely in Oklahoma, folks are pro free market, pro business, pro property rights, and the more that folks realize that that's what we're talking about here is letting people be able to build what they want on their property and what works for their projects. I think that's going to grow support for these types of developments and processes for approving them.
Yeah, and it really creates more diversity within your city, not just, okay, Edmond looks like this same town because it has a strip of fast food and car washes. It creates the culture and the diversity that makes really that city distinct from the next one over.
Exactly.
Edmond Urbanist advocates for affordable housing in your city. What are the biggest barriers to affordable housing in Edmond right now, and how are you working to address them?
Several years ago, the city of Edmond completed the Edmond Housing Assessment, which was really one of our first attempts as a city to identify and quantify the problem. And not surprisingly, it identified the biggest barriers were, of course, public sentiment toward apartments and dense type development, as well as just city planning and code processes that make it really difficult and time consuming to build anything other than suburban sprawl. And that's not that there's anything nefarious. It's just we've only built a certain type of way for so many decades that gets baked into all of your codes and your processes and institutional knowledge. So we're having to relearn, how to build a city that Edmond would have looked like 100 years ago, with really dense neighborhoods and walkable corridors and business districts that are, intertwined with folks. And so being able to move beyond that 1950s and 1980s style of suburban sprawl and like I said, the types of businesses that cater to cars, like car washes and fast food, that folks are unhappy with. They want to see something different. It's just a matter of being able to present the case to show if we keep doing what we've always done, then we're just going to keep getting what we've always gotten. And so the Edmond Housing Assessment had a lot of goals and strategies of how we can improve the planning and zoning processes and really free property owners to be able to build what works and to have the city support that will help facilitate those projects rather than being an impediment to them.
What changes have you seen over the past couple of years since trying to introduce these policies?
Sure. Well, reform is slow, and
yeah, of course.
Attitudes change slowly, and a lot of that's shaped generationally. The Edmond Housing Assessment speaks to that very clearly when it shows that for millennials and Gen Z and younger, the prospect of being able to afford a home that's $400,000, which I think is about the average sale price of a home in Edmond. And this housing assessment was done several years ago, so that's only gone up. But that's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable for our workforce. Our university, the University of Central Oklahoma, and our Edmond Public Schools are our two largest employers in the city of Edmond. And to realize that we don't have nearly enough attainable housing for students or for faculty, for elementary school teachers, for the folks who help run the businesses that operate in the city of Edmond, that we've got to find a more sustainable path. And that means workforce housing and an all of the above housing strategy that builds more types of housing and allows for more types of housing other than large lots, large homes, and suburban sprawl. And we have plenty of that, and there's certainly going to be plenty more single-family home subdivisions that are built in Edmond. So looking at how can we change the processes and the incentives to allow some diversity in types of housing that's going to work for everybody, especially our workforce here. Edmond has a major challenge in that about 80% of our population in the workforce leaves town every morning to commute to Oklahoma City and beyond for work. Well, at the same time, the folks who work in Edmond during the day are driving in from out of town because there's not affordable housing for them in the city limits. And obviously that's not sustainable. If you want to grow businesses, you want to have stores and restaurants that are successful, they've got to have daytime customer base, and they've got to have a workforce base that they can draw from, especially even for some of these lower wage jobs that are critical. We need them in our city, and we just don't have a place for a lot of those folks to live.
I can definitely relate. I mean, I'm sure many other people can definitely relate who are listening. I've drive to work every single day to Austin, and like many of the thousands of people on I-35, it's not fun just because it's unaffordable to live within the city limits of Austin. Even though we all work there, it's definitely unaffordable.
Yeah, and for the next generation, my son's about to turn 9, and so I think about what is his hometown going to look like in 10 years whenever he's graduating high school and looking at steps in life. I'd sure like his hometown to be in the running, at least for him to want to stay, to have job opportunities, and to not sentence him to a career and a lifetime of long commutes that we know are only going to grow longer, more time spent in the car, more time spent in traffic, versus opportunities to live and work and play and have a community and have friends and family that are all in the same city. And we know things are going to have to change to be able to keep families and communities closer and to have job opportunities for our next generation that go beyond the long commute.
Of course. You highlight a wide range of advocacy work from research to placemaking. What recent advocacy efforts are you most proud of, and why?
Yeah, so I'm really proud of just the response that we've seen to share when we share some of the development that's happening in Edmond. A lot of this is higher income, high quality type builds of mixed use and pocket neighborhoods that aren't necessarily affordable housing, but it does help grow the appreciation to show people these are high quality projects that really are going to enhance quality of life. And I think it helps build appreciation and familiarity with that, and kind of grow capacity and critical mass for developers. If they can be successful with these projects, then we can start looking at even more ambitious projects that will actually bring some affordable housing for the next generation. Some of the advocacy that I've been most proud about has actually not been incredibly successful as far as getting some apartments, just market rate apartment complexes. In a lot of cases, we've had, even as recently as this past week, had those that were shot down, planning commission or city council, but they've been close votes. And so the fact that we have several members of the city council who are open to that and see the value of that and have expressed frustration in why can't we just follow the city codes and ordinances as written and approve things that meet all of our codes now for this type of housing. I think that means that at least they're open to the concept, and that we're helping to move the conversation more toward getting to yes versus being an automatic no. And then finally, I want to add things when it comes to transportation. We've in Edmond and in the metro area, we've seen a lot of interest and support for the idea of a regional transit system with commuter rail that's going to connect Edmond, Oklahoma City, and Norman, so the 3 largest cities in the metro area. And we're hoping to see a vote on that in the next couple of years. And that really has the potential not only to transform how folks get to work and do the commute differently, but Edmond would benefit inordinately from that, because that would bring new opportunities for development around a rail station, transit-oriented development in our downtown, as well as really keeping UCO, our university here, on the map by having it connected to the larger metro area, because a lot of university students and faculty don't necessarily live in Edmond because of housing affordability reasons. This would give a better opportunity for us to grow the university and recruit more students who could take the train or take the bus into town. And we've tried to be one of the leading voices in keeping that on folks' radar. And whenever we get to the point of campaigning for a vote, we want to show that that's going to be a really great opportunity for investment that goes just beyond the commute, as well as really helping our downtown and university.
Do you know the population of UCO?
I know UCO's student population has increased in the last couple of years, and they're getting close to being back at pre-pandemic levels of student enrollment. That's of course just been a challenge, just because of a challenge that all universities have faced.
Of course, of course. That train line sounds awesome. It would definitely encourage, I hope, infrastructure around those transit stops
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
housing, apartments, restaurants, because
And
people want to live
Edmond
next to
doesn't have a
those.
rail station, or Oklahoma City and Norman both
Yeah.
have their old legacy Santa Fe stations along the
Hmm.
rail line. Edmond would actually has the opportunity to build a new one, and we've looked at some examples, even in Dallas Fort Worth with DART and Trinity Metro. And my wife and I just recently took a trip to Grapevine, where in near the Dallas Fort Worth airport, where they built a grand transit oriented development around their rail station that has a hotel downtown, has a food, a big food, European style food court, and lots of opportunities for businesses. And they're reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah, I haven't made a trip up to DFW. I have a friend who lives up there. I keep telling him, hey, I'm going to take the Amtrak up there and then dart to where you are. And I just haven't had the time to. Did you take Amtrak down from Oklahoma City to DFW?
I have before. Our
Okay.
Amtrak line runs down into downtown Fort Worth, and so from there you've got to go back out
Oh,
if you're going to connect to DART or some of the other areas. But it is possible, yes, to go take the
yeah.
train into Fort Worth and then take Trinity Metro or Tex Rail over to Dallas and connect in with DART, or to use the Metro lines to get to the airport and Grapevine and some of the cities that are on the north side of Fort Worth.
Edmond's first walkable new urbanism inspired neighborhood, Liberty Park, recently advanced through planning. What does that project represent for the city's growth trajectory?
Yeah, Liberty Park's a very ambitious project, and it's really creating, I mean, it's going to create a destination neighborhood in Edmond, something that Edmond's not seen, and it won't be as familiar with folks here, but when they see it built and the renderings and the plans that the developers put together are very, very good in showing off the quality and the quality of life that it's going to bring. And I think that a lot of people in Edmond are familiar with places like the Wheeler District in Oklahoma City or Carlton Landing in eastern Oklahoma, which are new urbanism style developments. And they've been built out over a decade or more. And so now they've transitioned into being more than single family homes. Now they've got shops and restaurants and small private schools and churches, and, are bringing multifamily opportunities. And folks are seeing that these are high quality homes that give you an opportunity to really live in community and have, a walkable space and to live a healthier lifestyle, and to be connected with your neighbors, to be connected with the business owners around. And the fact that Liberty Park and some of these other new urbanism developments that are in the works in Edmond are going to bring new business opportunities that are going to bring sales tax. And that's very attractive to the city for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Whenever we build suburban subdivisions, sure, it brings more customers to town, but it doesn't necessarily translate into sales tax growth. If we build a dense neighborhood with a lot of new residents that also has business opportunities baked into it, that's a win for the city. And we also, have it brings more attractive type housing for entrepreneurs, for folks who are retirees and empty nesters, from people who work from home. And we've got a lot of that in Edmond. And I think that this helps, again, just build critical mass and appreciation for that type of development.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds very, very similar to a neighborhood in Austin called Mueller, and it actually used to be Austin's old airport back in the 40s
Oh,
and
okay.
50s, and they just completely started from scratch. They built very dense urban apartments and restaurants, and I was just at the Performing Arts Center, and there are still definitely cars around and there's parking garages, but they're not big, giant, wide stroads where it's super dangerous to get
Right.
across the street. You could live there and then walk to get breakfast at a restaurant and go to the park right next door. And it's all super close. So, I mean, that sounds awesome what they're building there at Liberty Park.
It is. And, it's not in downtown Edmond, but it's not super far out either.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a growing part of the city so it's, surrounded by a lot of single family subdivisions, but Liberty Park will actually give folks opportunity that while they may have to leave the neighborhood in the morning to drive to work and commute back home, when they get back home in the evening, they've got lots of opportunities right out their doorstep to have a coffee shop, a local bar, restaurants, to meet with their neighbors, to have community spaces and open spaces and trails and sidewalks, to be able to have an active lifestyle. that doesn't require them to leave the house again in the car to get their groceries, to go get food, to meet
Yeah,
with people.
that definitely would dissuade me. I just got back from work. I'm so tired. I don't want to get back in the car after an hour-long commute to go get some coffee with a friend. Actually, it's right downstairs below me or across the street. Let's go get some coffee. So it sounds like people are really encouraged by the infrastructure to spend time and more money in that neighborhood. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, that's right. And it's one of the great tools we have in the fight against loneliness and isolation that so many folks experience. And people who have smaller families or living single or without children, now they've got lots of opportunities with their neighbors, with to be regular at the coffee shop, to get to know folks who are in the neighborhood. And Liberty Park also is really strategic in that it's being built adjacent to one of our large elementary schools for families that move into that neighborhood. The prospect of being able to walk their kids to school and pick them up. That's what I get to do with my son in the neighborhood we live in downtown Edmond. And man, it's great to not have to do
Yeah.
the hour
Sit in
the hour
the
long sit,
yeah.
in the pickup and drop off line. That completely changes how the day works when you can just walk to school and be involved at school, but also to drop off and collect your kids really quickly.
So, pocket neighborhoods or missing middle housing are gaining attention. How important are these housing types to Edmond Urbanist goals, and how do they fit into broader housing strategies?
I mean, they're hugely important. And it's really, really, really critical for folks to know that when we talk about housing and increasing the amount of affordable and attainable housing, it's not a either or choice of single family subdivision versus high rise apartment. Obviously, those high rise apartments have their place, and we definitely could use some in downtown Edmond or maybe along the interstate. But you can really grow capacity quickly when you just allow different types of housing, even just for single property owners. The prospect of being able to build an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit in your backyard, so you have a place to rent. You can realize some income from rental to maybe rent out to a student or a teacher who's fresh out of college, or it's a place that your parents or grandparents could move into. Now you could have the family all in one spot while still having some independence and privacy. And then some things even like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. These don't look that much different from what you have in your neighborhood already. And we've got some older neighborhoods in Edmond that have a mixture of housing types. My neighborhood it's a historic neighborhood from the 20s and 30s, and it's got large mansions. It's also got homes that are less than 1,000 square feet. It's got homes with ADUs in the backyard. And it's one of the more attractive neighborhoods in Edmond because you have such a diversity of housing types, and you have historic homes, but you've also got a walkable neighborhood that was built before everyone was driving everywhere. And you've got a lot of amenities nearby. And it supports a lot of different types of families. So we have retirees, we have young families, we have singles, we have large families all living in the same neighborhood. And it shows that that's possible. And it's not a new concept. It's really just relearning the things that were just commonplace and very traditional from whenever Oklahoma was young 100 years ago.
Yeah, and in these walkable neighborhoods, everybody, it's not like a desert where you have to get inside your car and to go to the grocery store to get coffee. They can walk or bike, or maybe, I'm not sure how connected the transit network is to all these neighborhoods. Can you tell me more about that?
Edmond's transit system is pretty small relative to our population. I think it works well for what we've got, and it's mostly centered around the university, the urban core, with some connector routes to farther out areas. Having worked in public transit space and was on our public transportation committee in Edmond for many, many years, it's always a chicken and the egg thing. And it's once you start having some density or some big job centers that start to develop, that's what gives public transit really the justification to be able to expand. And Edmond actually is in the process of adding a new route on the north side of town that will connect to a new dense development that's going to have a lot of that missing middle housing. It's going to have townhomes, it's going to have apartments, and some smaller lot size single family homes built in a mixture of commercial space, office space, and then it will connect into our medical district, if you call that, in some areas where two of our large hospitals in Edmond have really grown. And that's, some of our bigger employers now. And the prospect of being able to, if you're a hospital, be able to recruit nurses, techs, food service workers, janitors, the things hospitals need to operate. If they can now be able to recruit and say, yes, we've got housing that's either nearby or it is connected in by public transit. And of course, the RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority that I mentioned earlier, which would connect all of our cities in together, will give all of the cities, Edmond, Oklahoma City, the opportunity to rethink their transit system. And it'll give those Embark and Edmond City Link an opportunity to redraw some of those routes and connect buses in with rail transit in a meaningful way that'll get commuters connected, and as well as being able to expand and extend some of those routes to serve more areas, knowing that density is always going to be the goal. We can't have bus routes serve every single family neighborhood, but we can go to the places that have the highest concentration of people and jobs.
So, quick question. There is a difference between YIMBY, OKC, and the Edmond Urbanist?
Yeah, it's a chapter of YIMBY Action Network that several of us, some partners and I, started this last year, and we're looking to really grow that in 2026 and 2027. Again, just meeting with like-minded folks. There's folks who are doing this in Oklahoma City and in Norman, and we want to grow the advocacy role in that to be able to help in those cities, but also other cities in the metro area, to be able to advocate for this type of development. And all of the cities in the metro area I think are grappling with, does their development code meet the demands of housing and of job growth and businesses today, and to really help show the successes that are happening in the metro area and see if we can use that as a template for success in some of the other cities. YIMBY OKC, one of our big goals is acknowledging Oklahoma and Oklahoma City, the metro area, have some of the more affordable housing in the U.S. right now. We know that's not always going to be the case if we continue to grow without changing how we grow and the types of housing that's possible. So if we can not become another Austin or Denver where it reaches an emergency level before reform is considered, we think that'll actually help the metro area be able to grow in a smoother way, and of course make the case that growth in population, growth in jobs and businesses doesn't necessarily have to mean a huge amount of more cars on the highway. If we can do development differently and do infrastructure differently, then we can avoid gridlock and avoid the prospect of spending billions of dollars on new highways that aren't necessarily going to alleviate any of that traffic.
There's YIMBY and there's also NIMBY. There's a conversation about zoning and NIMBYism in the region, with some municipalities resisting change. What's the local political climate around zoning reform, and how do you engage with that?
What's comforting to me is that the conversations and the challenges in Edmond, really aren't that much different than they are in just about any other similar city in the U.S. A lot of it's generational, and a lot of it is just unfamiliarity. Whenever folks if they don't know what a development might look like, then your imagination runs wild, and you start thinking worst case scenarios. If we really try to encourage developers to have good renderings and a lot of thought put into the aesthetics to show that this is high quality construction, and it's housing that's going to appeal to lots of different types of folks, not just low income, but families, young professionals. And then what's interesting in Oklahoma anyway is, we're not going to really point to Manhattan or Los Angeles or San Francisco as examples, but there are lots of examples that people in Oklahoma are familiar and comfortable with. If you look in Dallas, Fort Worth, Carrollton, Plano, Grapevine, or Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Fayetteville area, you can see how mixed use, dense, walkable neighborhoods, and even, the types of apartments that you see a lot in some of those cities and some of their suburbs have been really successful and are playing a big role in how those areas are able to recruit new jobs and how they're able to grow. Even in Oklahoma City with the Thunder, with soccer, a lot of the development that's happening in the downtown area, is going to be very sports and athletic and event driven. And that's something that lots of people in Oklahoma understand, regardless of their political ideals. And Oklahoma City is really having its moment with the Thunder, and that's not by accident. That's been several decades of hard work and good planning to get to where they are, and they're reaping the benefit of that. And then I also want to say, in Oklahoma, in a conservative political environment, most folks, express their belief in property rights, in free markets, in less government, restrictions on businesses. And when they realize that this is what we're talking about right here, a lot of these developments, they don't have tax dollars involved in them at all. This is things that the market is bringing to city government saying, we want to build this with private investment on private property. And I think when more folks are able to connect those dots, they realize this is actually a really conservative and traditional type of development, because it's allowing business owners and property owners to do what they want with their property. And that's something that I'd say is pretty sacred to most Oklahomans. We just have to help connect the dots.
I read this really great book on my way to the Oklahoma City Marathon. It's called Boomtown by Sam Anderson. Have you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, it was so good. And I learned so much about the basketball team and the state of Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. I definitely recommend that to anybody who wants to learn more. I kind of picked it up by accident. I was like, Boomtown sounds all right, but then I just listened to it for like 8 hours straight. It was really good.
It's a great read.
Yeah.
That land run, Wild West kind of heritage in Oklahoma, I mean, it's something we all can tap into, and we can all realize that, all of our small towns in Oklahoma popped up because of the freedom to be able to build. Edmond and Oklahoma City and lots of our cities in Oklahoma 100 years ago, 110 years ago would have looked like dense, walkable communities where you have the schoolhouse and you've got the town square and you've got neighborhoods and you can walk to the butcher shop and you can walk to the mill and the lumber yard and the train station, and that's not anything foreign or new for Oklahoma.
As the city grows and housing demand increases, a recent estimate that Edmond may need nearly 9,000 new homes in the next decade. What strategies should Edmond prioritize to meet that need sustainably?
Edmond is undergoing a really comprehensive update to its zoning and development code, basically to reduce the complexity, to allow for more housing types. And we are going to advocate for making that as ambitious as possible to allow for more by right development. So if you own the property, you get to build things on there, especially in the downtown area, where we think that could have the most success. And then, we're going to keep advocating for the city to explore possibly creating a housing authority. That's not something Edmond has ever had, but most cities of our size, even some of the cities smaller than Edmond, have had housing authorities for many decades. That just gives the city the ability to leverage federal funds as well as some tax credits to incentivize construction of purpose-built affordable housing, which we don't have a lot of in Edmond. And we think that is part of the solution. It's not the single solution, but being able to free up the types of development that can happen, explore more public-private partnerships using Edmond's TIF district in downtown, and possibly creating some additional TIF districts in parts of the city where it makes sense, I think are all strategies that are part of all of the above to grow the quantity and the types of housing that we need.
Awesome. Can you tell me more about those TIF districts?
So in Edmond, we have one TIF district that's in the downtown central business district, and it was created in 2020, and it's working as intended. It's been successful in bringing a lot of new types of development downtown, some apartments, some mixed-use development, and some pocket neighborhoods that are all either built or under construction right now or about to begin construction. TIF is one of the best tools that we have in Oklahoma. Again, as I mentioned, because property taxes are very restricted in how cities can use them, TIF actually gives us the opportunity for new development to help pay for itself by using the rising property values in a TIF district to contribute to the cost of infrastructure and the things that we know will need to be done for development to be successful. And it just helps seal the deal. It helps developers be able to work the math out if they can utilize some TIF funding to reimburse them for some of the infrastructure costs and to help incentivize the types of development that we want to have, especially in our downtown area. I think Edmond will look at some other TIF districts in the coming years, and then the city really needs to focus on, again, the development code and the processes we have to help get these projects moved through faster, so we don't have projects that take 2 or 3 years of reviews before they can ever start construction. And because our TIF is a 20-year TIF and we're already 6 years into it, we want to help the city. The city has a vested interest in helping those projects move along faster. Obviously, the city can't do much about the inflation of construction costs or the supply chain challenges that builders have faced since the pandemic. But the city absolutely can play a role in moving those things through review faster so they can start turning dirt.
Looking ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, what do you hope Edmond will look like, and what key milestones do you want Edmond Urbanist to be known for helping achieve?
Well, Edmond is very close to 100,000 people in terms of population. That's something for economic development. It's a big number that they are interested in reaching, just because it makes the city more attractive for bringing different types of businesses and big name brands and perhaps corporate employers to town. Specific things like, our growing density in downtown, so more downtown businesses can be successful, and we can have new businesses in downtown because they've got the live-in population in our downtown area. The University District, which will connect downtown Edmond to the UCO campus, is a great opportunity. Edmond's not really known as a college town or a place with a big amount of nightlife. This neighborhood can really help knit that together and make a destination right there across the street from our university. And that can help with recruitment, growing the student population, and bringing new types of programs and enhancing the sports experience, which is something that can really help put Edmond on the map in a new way there. Edmond's also, of course, looking at some transportation things. I've mentioned the RTA, which would connect Edmond with the other large cities in the metro area. And the city is also looking with ODOT, the Department of Transportation, on reimagining the US 77 corridor that goes through town. That's Broadway and 2nd Streets. This is all part of historic Route 66. In a lot of cases, it's overbuilt. We've got some spots of a big 6-lane highway running through the middle of town. Reimagining that corridor to make it more business friendly, to make it more people friendly, could really expand the types of growth and development we've seen in downtown several miles in either direction. And I think that that's something I'm really looking forward to over the next generation, to see how my son and his peers reimagine those spaces and think of more hometown, local type development and activities versus driving out of town to go to Oklahoma City or somewhere else to spend their money.
Yeah, I always like to ask this question to all of my guests on here. What is a book that you recommend or have read recently pertaining to the subject of urbanism, transportation, city living?
Yeah, I recently read The Color of Law, which was one of those big kind of milestone texts that really highlights the history of not only development codes, but how school districts were drawn, how government policy was really driving a lot of the segregation and discrimination in housing, not just along the lines of race, but also the lines of income, and how so much of that just is pervasive throughout all of our regulatory and building framework, and showing that we've made a lot of mistakes, and that even in areas where we think we've made big progress, there's still a lot of work to be done, and allowing for the American dream to be possible for everyone in our cities. And Edmond has, unfortunately, the sordid history of being a sundown town. It was pretty upfront that there were no Black residents here until the 70s. And so when folks realize that and know that instead of it just being shame, that we can actually play a role in reshaping our future. And a lot of that is going to be changing laws and regulations and just allowing more types of housing, and being comfortable with the fact that we all live here, we all work here, that we need to work together and help ensure that dream is realizable to everyone.
I have not heard about that book, but I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, it talks a lot about redlining, and it really starts even pre-World War II and goes all the way, even into the 90s, to show that so much of how zoning and school districts being drawn was driven by the desire to preserve segregation, even when we thought we had outlawed segregation.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, taking the time on a holiday to talk to us.
Oh, yeah.
I really appreciate it. Where can people find you online?
Visit edmondurbanist.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. We're excited. We've hired our first student intern for this spring, and she is a master's in public health student. She has a lot of experience in sustainability and looking at the built environment as it pertains to public health. And she's going to help us with some more ambitious research projects and delivering more content. So we're really, really excited about what we can show. And we're hoping to do some more videos and interviews like this to complement photos that we show of development and PUDs and stuff like that. So there's exciting days ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll hear more about you online.
Okay.
All right. See you later. That wraps up today's episode of Cities in Motion. Huge thanks to Cody Boyd of Edmond Urbanist for the work they're doing and for taking the time to share what's happening in Edmond and the Oklahoma City region. If you found this conversation valuable, please follow and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps people find the show and keeps these conversations going. You can find Cities in Motion on Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, next week is the Season 1 finale. Until next time, I'm Jacob. Thanks for listening and keep your cities in motion.